Antelope 101, one of the most high pace and funnest ways to hunt antelope is going to be using a decoy. But in that case, timing is everything, and there's multiple ways to do it. There's a lot of different options for decoys, but you're going to want to make sure the timing is right. For most of the western states that I've hunted, September 7th up until about September 20th is going to be the fast-paced time of the rut, where you see a lot of chasing. You see the dominant bucks with the does, and those dominant bucks are just running satellite bucks off constantly, and they're satellite bucks on the move and just cruising around, roaming the country trying to find a doe in heat. So the basis of decoy hunting, if you're wanting to do it in the peak of the rut and get a dominant buck, then you're going to have to make sure your timing is right for that too. And what you're looking for is you're going to be in a position where you're able to watch a main harem and watch that dominant buck, and you may have to spend hours waiting for the right time. But what you're waiting for is a satellite buck to try to move in on a bedded doe, and when the harem of does. And when that satellite buck approaches, the dominant buck is going to run him off. And I've seen bucks just totally run another buck almost out of sight. And even though you think they're gone, that dominant buck is going to come back, and that's your time to strike. What you want to do is try to get in a position between where he went and where his does are, so that when he returns, you're able to put that decoy up, and he's thinking that a subdominant buck has now moved in on his does while he was occupied taking the other one out. And that's when you're going to get the dominant buck come in hard. Now, another thing that you can do is use bedded does. And truthfully, bedded does is one of the most effective means of decoying that I've had. You don't always get the biggest buck that's in the area, but you're definitely going to get a good buck, and you're going to certainly have a lot of action with the satellite bucks. So in those situations, what I would do is I would try to find a place where I have a lot of visual. So if antelope are cruising around, they can see you and what you're doing. So in that case, what I do is I set up a blind, and I'll set up bedded does in a half circle around my blind so that I'm able to have a complete shooting opportunity in front of me. Those bucks are going to see all these does there and no other buck, and they're going to come in to investigate. Now, I've used 3D targets, and some of these have seen better days for sure over the last 20 years. I've used 3D targets, but I've also, in cases where I don't have the ability to take out that much equipment, I've also used silhouette decoys that I made out of cardboard. I've taken large pieces of cardboard and glued two sides together with a wooden stake in between, and I'll paint them up to resemble the same coloration of the antelope does. And again, I'll stake those out with the wind in my face. I'll stake them out in front of that blind in all of my shooting range. Those bucks are going to charge in, and you can actually see them looking at each one of the does trying to figure out what's going on, and you're going to have time to be able to range and make your shot. It's worked unbelievable. Another way to decoy is simply kind of doing the spot and stalk tactic, where you're walking around and you're maneuvering terrain where you're not totally visible and running everything out of the country, and use something that's packable. I've used either a fold-up decoy, or I've even had a decoy hat that I can keep on my backpack and just put on and peek over the top of a rise so that something sees me and comes up over that rise to investigate. Another way that you can utilize decoys, and what I've done, is actually taking just a subdominant buck decoy like these. And again, this one's seen better days, but it's been effective. You can sit on a water source with that subdominant buck just there at the water source. A lot of times, satellite bucks, if they see another buck, they're going to come over to investigate if there's does bedded down nearby. And by using them on the water source, you might even have them come into the water, and they're still going to approach the decoy and they're going to be occupied and give you time for the shot. The most important key that I can tell you, though, when it comes to decoying antelope, again, is the timing. You've got to make sure that they're chasing and they're in that rutting phase. For me, the peak is going to be mid-September most of the time. If you stick to those basic principles, decoying 101 should be super effective.